My wife is perhaps the best cook I've ever known. She really knows how to cook. She also knows how to bake. Her pie crust is better than any I've ever had. Now, she's good enough at this that she knows the difference between cooking and baking. And I sort of get it. You cook on the stove, you bake in the oven or whatever. But when I'm going to put the groceries away, she says, that goes in the baking cabinet, and that goes in the cooking cabinet. She has those divided out. And I have no idea what she's talking about. Why this is baking and that's for cooking, and that just makes no sense at all to me, because as far as I'm concerned, there's only one way to prepare food, which is with fire. I'm talking barbecue, right? But anyway, I say this because I think that's how some of you may feel as we're trying to make these distinctions and sort and categorize all of these Greek verbs. It's just like, no, that goes in the baking cabinet. No, that goes in the cooking cabinet. And you're like, not only are there more than 2 cabinets, there's a whole kitchen full of cabinets, and you're just overwhelmed by it all. I understand, okay? So just deep breath, it's going to be okay. The human mind is sort of like a file drawer. At least that's how I see it, is like everything you put into your mind stays there. The problem is you can't find it. The human mind, maybe you could think of it as a very messy file drawer, because it's like in the file drawer you might have a paper clip and an old eraser and a tax return from 1993 and an old Valentine's Day card from your wife and maybe a picture of your kids, and it's in there somewhere, you just can't find it, and it's not sorted out and organized. In a lot of ways, all that Greek is just organizing your brain to understand Greek. I'm giving you the structures, I'm giving you the file folders and the little separator tags to help you make sense of the Greek verb. And it's a very orderly thing. You'll learn to love Greek once you get it organized. So let's not give up. We will organize your brain. So today I offer you a whole new folder for your mind into which you may file verbs called Second Aorists. Yay! Now what's a Second Aorist? Well, let's just remember, a liquid aorist, we've met those before. We know what those are, right? They are aorists whose stem ends in lambda, mu, nu, or rho. And we've seen that when we add the sigma alpha on the end, we drop the sigma and there are these vowel contractions. Okay, so that's a liquid aorist. Second aorist is something completely different. Now it's just a form. It's just a different form that a verb will show you to say, I'm an aorist. No change in the meaning, whether it's liquid or second or regular. It all always means what it means, which is undefined action, past time. That's the aorist. So the second aorist is just a form used by Greek to show you I'm an aorist. Okay, probably the easiest way to get at this is to start with English, because we do a very similar sort of thing in English. We have a regular way of putting things into the past time, right? So if I take a verb like, say, shop, and I want to make it past time, what do? I add ed to the end, right? Shopped. Or if I want to take a verb like play, and I want to make it past time, I add an ed to the end, played. That's a very regular way to show things are in the past. But now take a verb like go. Let's say I want to make it in the past time. I go. Now what if I go in the past? How do I say that? I almost said it there. Well, you know what little kids say? I goed to the store yesterday. And we go, no, little dumb dimwit, That's not, it's not I goed to the store, I went to the store. We correct them. Now we're correcting them, but really their assumption was perfectly logical. Go, make it past tense, you should just add an ed and it would be goed. But for some odd reason, go in the past is went. Why? Well, it's one of those things that just is, okay? Sometimes in English, a verb will just change its form to show you that it's going into the past. A less dramatic example would be, for example, the verb run. Run is present tense. If I want to make it past tense, runned, right? I runned over him. No, run becomes ran. So it's just one letter change, but do you see that the verb changed form to show you it went into past time? Okay, that's all a second aorist is. Rather than using the regular form that we've come to expect, the sigma alpha, right? That's a regular way to show you I'm an aorist. The second aorists use a stem change. Again, repeat for emphasis here. A second aorist is a verb in which the verb will change form to tell you that it's aorist. There will be no sigma alpha. It doesn't use a sigma alpha, it changes form. Now, I'll bet you could guess which endings we will use. The secondary endings, right? Because we're still in past time, right? And there will be an augment, right? But here's the deal. With the second aorists, because there's no sigma alpha, they wind up looking just like the imperfects do. But remember, with the imperfect, there is no stem change, right? It uses the present tense stem, the one you'll find in the dictionary. But with the second aorists, remember that the defining feature of the second aorist is that the verb changes when it goes into past time. So let's observe. Take a look at your master chart and notice where the second aorist bubble is here. It's just one of the forms of the aorist. Now I'll say it again because I really want you to get this in your head. There's no difference in meaning between a liquid or a second aorist or just a regular aorist. An aorist is an aorist, undefined action in past time. These are just three different forms of aorists that you will meet along the way. Okay, now notice over here to the right, I also want to point out we have a second perfect and a second aorist passive and a second future passive. They're really no big deal. Not that common and not that big of a deal at all. These three bubbles right here are the important ones. Liquid futures, liquid aorists, and really, more than anything else, the second aorist, because they are very common in English and in Greek. So it's very normal for Greek to put a verb into the aorist tense by changing the stem. So let's take a look at lambano and see how we can turn lambano into a second aorist. Lambano means I take. Okay, so all right, we got lambano. Let's try to apply normal aorist rules and see if we could figure out what that would be. Well, we would have an augment, lam, bon, and then sigma alpha, right? That's our aorist ending right here. So sigma alpha. Oops, but wait a minute. We've got a liquid thing going here, don't we? So we would probably just drop this sigma. So you would expect that to be elambana. That sounds like a crazy new dance. Do you do the elambana? Anyway, no, probably not. But hey, none of that means anything because there is no such thing as elambana because lambano has a second aorist. Now, what does that mean? It means that to make its aorist form, it changes its stem completely. All right, so we still have our augment, but then we have this stem change here, elab, on. Okay, now look at this. Lab came from lamban. Now, what is the rule for that? There is no rule. Okay, that's important to know. There's no rule for this. It's the same rule that we use in English when we say go becomes went. What's the rule for that? There is no rule, okay? It's just the way that verb behaves. When it goes into the aorist, its stem changes, and so it's just plain old different. Let's practice on a couple more just to make sure you're getting the idea. Balo means I throw. So again, if we were going to use our regular aorist rules on this, it would be ball, and then we would need our sigma alpha, right? So that's our nice aorist ending. Oh, once again, we have a liquid conflict here, so we would probably just drop the sigma there. Ebola. But that's not what happens with this word because this is a second aorist. The stem changes. So the correct aorist form of balo is we augment ba on. Now, whoa. Look at the difference in these two stems. What's the difference that you see there? Very minor, isn't it? Just one letter. But the two lambdas is the present tense stem, and when this goes into a second aorist, it simply loses a lambda. And notice again, using the secondary endings, no sigmas. So try to get this in your head. First aorists always have some kind of an alpha involved, except in the third person singular where it's an epsilon, right? but we're used to like alphas being sort of the clue with first aorists. But in second aorists, we won't have that alpha there because it's going to be on, s, n, amen, eta, on, okay? It's that secondary set of endings. So second aorists, the endings look different, and there's a stem change. So there's some good clues there. Lego is a very common word in the New Testament. It means I say. But an even more common word in the New Testament is I said. As we do in English and in probably every language, we're really interested in what I said. Well, I said, and I said, and I said. Well, there's a lot of I said in the New Testament too. So the aorist form of I say is very common. Now again, the regular kind of looking thing would look something like maybe this, Alexa, right? Something like that. There is no such word because Lego is a very odd second aorist. It's actually, and I'll just type it for you, you would never guess it, not in a million years. Apon means I said. Now how do you get from Lego to apon? You don't, right? That's why with the second aorists, you have to know both forms. Otherwise, just because you know Lego, you're reading along in the New Testament and you see this, you don't understand that they're the same word, but this is a second aorist. All right, so are you getting the idea of what the second aorist is? And one more thing I want to make sure that you see is that the aorist, the second aorist here, looks exactly like the imperfect, except for the stem change in the verb, okay? Because look at the endings. On, s, n, amen, eta, on. Amen, u, eta, amata, esta, anta. Well, same thing here, right? Exactly the same set of endings for the imperfect and the second aorist. So how will you tell an imperfect apart from a second aorist? Well, I've already said it, and I'm guessing you already could guess this, right? It's the stem change. In the imperfect, you'll have the present tense stem. In other words, the way it looks in the lexicon is the way it will look when you see it here. But with the second aorist, there will be a stem change. So lambano became elabon. But here it was just luo, and lu is still there, unchanged. So the imperfect, it's, remember, ongoing action, past time, it's like a present with an augment and secondary endings. The second aorist is an augment, a stem change, and the secondary endings. So learn to recognize these clues. In your workbook, you will find a list of second aorists that occur more than 50 times in the New Testament. These are important because they are very common, most of them. Let's just go through these. I want to show you how these behave. So we have, first of all, see up erchomai here? Erchomai, there are many forms of it. Erchomai in Greek just indicates motion, okay? So Greek will append prepositions to kind of give you the direction. So apa means away from, so ap, erchomai, I depart. But notice when it goes into the past here, when it goes into the aorist, ap eilthon. Erchomai here becomes eilthon here, which is really strange, but that's what a second aorist is. Strange, okay? Now we looked at balo here, which becomes ebalon in the second aorist. Gnosko, I know, also sort of speaks about us humans. We are know-it-alls, so this is pretty common too. I know in the second aorist is egnon. Now you'll notice the ending here is a little odd. Most of them, notice, follow this nice pattern on. There are a couple of oddballs. We're getting used to that idea, right, in Greek. Nothing is perfectly regular. It's language, after all. This is not a computer that cranked this out. This is people. So there's some loose ends and rough edges, okay? Well, here we go again. Erchomai. Notice erchomai, but here we have eis erchomai. Remember the preposition eis means into, so eis erchomai, I go into. And put it in the past, eis eilthon, just like we saw before. Erchomai becomes eilthon. Hey, here we go again. Remember we already looked at balo up here? Here we have ek balo. Ek means away from, out of, right? So ek balo, I cast out, I throw out, okay? And then we have this ex ebelon ending here, the second form. Okay, here we go, another form of erchomai. Are you seeing a pattern here, right? And I just got to say this about Greek. I think of it like Legos. If you can learn these basic verbs, you can see how they build on each other. Ex is like out, so ex erchomai, I go out, becomes ex eilthon in the aorist. And here's good old erchomai, just plain old, which means I come or I go. Motion again. Usually it just means I come. But it can mean I go, which I think that's funny that there's this word that means I come or go. To me, that's like sort of an important distinction. But here's the second aorist. Erchomai becomes eilthon. You getting the idea? They stem change. Okay, I'll just do a couple more here to point these out to you. Why don't we scroll on down here. Estheo means I eat. Ephagon, I ate. Heurisko, I find. Huron, I found. How do you get from here to there? It's a second aorist. There is no path except memorization. I have echo. I had eschan. Katabino, I go down. Kat ebein, I went down. Lambano, I take. Elabon, I took. And of course, this is the one that we were looking at as we studied on the chart, the second aorist. We also looked at Lego, right? Which becomes apon. Don't worry about these little guys here. All in good time, my friend, all in good time. Horao I see, Adon I saw. Pino I drink. Epion I drank. Some of these are, close, but just a little different. See, we lost the new there. Pipto I fall. Epison, I fell. Here's another form of erchomai. Pros erchomai. Pros is to come toward, like come alongside, right? Pros erchomai, I come to. So pros eilthon is the aorist form. And finally, sun ago, I gather together. And sun agagon is I gathered together. All right, well, let's look at some of these in the wild, which is so much more fun, so much more dangerous and exciting. Anyway, here they are. Okay, John 1, verse 11, eis ta idia eilthen. Into his own things he came. Eilthen. Now we look at that verb there, and what would be the present form? He comes. Well, that would be erchomai. Remember, I say this is a very important verb. You'll see it all over the place. More actually in the aorist than in the present, but you'll see it both ways. Erchomai, I come. Eilthon, I go. Now here we don't have eilthon, right, but eilthen. Why eilthen? Because we're looking at our third person singular ending, right? So we're eilthen. He's talking about Jesus here, so into his own, he came. Eilthen, third person singular. And I'm not kidding you when I say these are common, because here we go, right in the same verse, par elabon is another second aorist. Elabon, and it's, remember, lambano, here we have par elabon. Now, you'll see that par elabon is not listed in the verbs used 50 times or more, because it's not that common, but lambano is I take, right? So elabon, I took, and it sort of makes sense that par elabon would be they received, they took, in a way, right? Okay? He came to his own, kai hoi idioi, his own ones, auton, him, u, par elabon. Okay, now what ending are we looking at here? Par elabon, this is third person plural, to match the they. His own ones, they did not receive. Okay, but the main thing I want you to see here is that that's a second aorist. If you try looking up par elabon or even elabon in the Greek dictionary, you won't find it, which is really frustrating. What you'll find is lambano, which will tell you, oh, I'm a second aorist, so in the aorist I look like this. That's why with these words, you need to know both forms to really have a good grasp of the words. In verse 42, as I said, okay, one of the most common second aorists in the Bible, he said, she said, it said,
I said, we like telling what we said, right? We're really interested in that. But okay, in this case, it's talking about Jesus. Ha Jesus apen. Now, what's the present form of apen? How would you look it up? Not under apen, but under lego. Because the dictionary will always list the present tense. But when lego goes into past, it doesn't become elegsa or something like that. It becomes apon. It's a second aorist. Now here we don't have apon, but ape-in. See this? Ape-in. Why that ending? Hopefully you're starting to see these things. That's the third person singular right here. Jesus, he said. Third person singular.
So now we're cooking. Or are we baking? And honey, do I put the basil in the baking or the cooking cabinet? And what is a second aorist? A second aorist, let's just remember, a second aorist is a verb that doesn't tell you it's aorist by adding sigma alpha. It says, hey, I'm an aorist, by changing the stem. And it winds up looking just like an imperfect, with the big exception that the stem has changed. All right, so don't despair. We will sort out that brain of yours. We will get it all organized. Soon we will be enjoying a feast of Greek understanding.